Hare Krishna. Welcome to you all. And we are tonight broadcasting from my temple room in Alachua, and I thought, well, this is nice because there's books behind me. So when you're speaking, you're supposed to have books behind you, right? Make you look smart, right? Okay, so tonight I'm using a different microphone, and I'm hoping that it actually sounds better and clearer. I'm not using the microphone from the computer, but I'm using a lapel mic, which is a much better mic. So just let me know on chat if you can hear me well, if you can hear me better than normal. Louder and better. Good. So welcome, Ganapati, Sneha, Radha. Sneha, it's 5:30 in the morning for Sneha. Rukmini Dwarkadish, Rukmini Didi, Pallavi, Brenda Lee, Roma. It's 1 o'clock in the morning for Roma. And she's going to wake up at 4 o'clock, right? I just heard a story that the devotees stayed up till like 12:30 or 1, and then they weren't going to get up till 6. They were with Prabhupada. And at 4 o'clock, Prabhupada asked, where is everybody? Why aren't they up for Mangalarti? No, Roma is okay. You don't have to do that. And Krishnadas and Avikam and all the others who are not here, or maybe they're here and I don't know. So I sent out an email today, and on that email it described what the class is going to be like. And I don't know if you've all got the email. If you want to get the email, then Pallavi, who is with us now, she's going to type in. Why don't you type in on the chat your email address, and if you write her, then every week she'll send you the topic of the course. And sometimes I don't give it every week because I'm traveling, so then you'll know also when I'm not going to be doing it. Pallavi, so she's going to write in her email address. Otherwise, you can write to me if somehow or other you forget. You can go to mahatma.das.com and you can contact me there. And this is not the newsletter, this is just to know about the weekly classes. Okay, so we sent out an email today about this class, and this is what it said the class was going to be about. How can we, and I'm reading this, how can we remain inspired when we don't always feel naturally attracted to doing our sadhana and service, but sometimes or often feel very attracted to material activities? How can we be enlivened when faced with reoccurring attachments that divert us from Krishna? Divert us from Krishna. How do we become steady when confronted with obstacles that tend to threaten our devotional creepers? And how can we not be discouraged when dealing with these and other aspects of our shadow when we understand that the inspiration, indeed the secret of bhakti, is a natural attraction and taste for service? So some of you may be wondering why I chose this topic and why I choose any topic. Well, there's several reasons. One thing that happens often is that I'm constantly questioned about certain things. And as I'm questioned again and again about the same topic, I believe at that point it's worth addressing because it seems to be a concern for everyone. And I also try to incorporate that within a topic I'm discussing. On Krishna.com, we usually do 10 or 15 courses on a particular topic. And so now we're on the topic of balance. And so I wanted to look at the balance between practice and taste. And when we talk about practice, the word sadhana means practice, as opposed to ruchi, as opposed to raganuga bhakti, which is more spontaneous and which is more natural. In fact, the definition of raganuga bhakti is that the motivation is not the instruction, not the order of the guru, not the order of Krishna. That's not what motivates one, but one is naturally motivated by a taste or an attraction. Whereas the definition of sadhana is the motivation comes because of the regulation, because of the instruction, not because we want to do it. And so, how do we balance these? Because, as I said here, that we know the secret in bhakti is to have a taste. And Satyananda Swami, he would often say, Prabhus, if you don't have a taste, how long can you go on chanting? You can't just go on forever without a taste. So then we might think, okay, well, taste is everything. But if I don't have a taste, it can be discouraging, especially if you've been a devotee a long time. It can be very discouraging. So what do? How do we deal with it? And the other aspect of this is how we can remain inspired in spite of our anarthas, in spite of the shadow, of the dark side, of the ugly things we see within our heart. How can we be inspired in Krishna consciousness? This is a very, very important topic because it can be very discouraging when we confront the many anarthas that seem to stick to us. Even sometimes we think we've overcome them, transcended them, and then they revisit us. And as we're going on in devotional service, sometimes we feel that we don't have bhakti, we don't have devotion because these things keep attracting us. Material things pull us in and they seem attractive. And often we can't pull ourselves away from them. And then we can become discouraged, we can become depressed, we can think, well, I'm not even really a devotee. Well, what kind of a devotee am I after all these years? Still I'm attracted to all these things. So this is a common theme that comes up, and often devotees become quite discouraged in looking at what's in their heart and making the effort to be Krishna conscious, but still finding these things deep within their heart. It can become so discouraging that maybe we don't want to continue, or we don't really understand if it's going to get better. In other words, what's the point of continuing? I'm doing this and it doesn't seem to be helping. So how do we deal with that? Well, to begin with, as a foundational statement, it's extremely important that we remain enthusiastic in devotional service. That's an essential ingredient, utsahan, and that's there in the Nectar of Instruction. It's the first verse, first instruction, to be enthusiastic. So what we're talking about here now is how to be enthusiastic when I don't have a reason to be, and I have a reason not to be. How to be enthusiastic when I'm not even attracted to doing what I'm supposed to do. Now, often you may have heard the saying, follow your own bliss, which means find what you like to do and do it, because when you like to do something, no one has to tell you. That's good. Find service that you like to do. But the problem is, there are some things we may not like to do, that we all have to do. We may not like following all the regulative principles. We may not like chanting 16 rounds. We may not like all the service that's given to us, or the responsibilities that are given to us. So there may be some things we don't like, and as Westerners, and particularly maybe not even as Westerners so much anymore, but growing up in the me generation, everything is about me, often it's hard to be inspired to do something that you don't like doing. You just become bored with it, you become lethargic. It's very common. I don't want to do this. I'm not going to do it. I don't like it. Why should I do it? But in Krishna consciousness, we have to learn to be enthusiastic, doing things which initially we may not like to do. So that's a challenge. But anyway, the first point is, it's extremely important that we always remain enthusiastic. Somehow or other, we need to remain enthusiastic, even if there is cause not to be enthusiastic. So that's a very important point. If there's cause not to be enthusiastic, and there may be many causes not to be enthusiastic, right? I mean, so many things happen to us. There's so much going on within our minds and hearts that could cause us not to be enthusiastic. So, foundational principle, we have to remain enthusiastic, and we have to remain enthusiastic in spite of the obstacles, in spite of the unwanted things within the heart. Now, before we go further, I wanted to talk a little bit about these things within the heart. It's very interesting. I don't know if I mentioned this to you last week or the week before, but if I did, I'll remind you that Srila Prabhupada said that Ravi Shankar was a maestro of sitar because for 1,000 lives he practiced sitar. Interesting. Okay, so now take that idea. Take that idea, 1,000 lives of practicing sitar. How many lifetimes have we practiced not being Krishna conscious? More than 10, right? Maybe 10 to the 100th power. In other words, we're well situated in the practices of not being Krishna conscious. So it shouldn't surprise us when our minds and hearts are not always absorbed in Krishna consciousness. It shouldn't surprise us. Actually, it should surprise us if they're not absorbed in material things. We are well rehearsed. We are well practiced. We are well conditioned. It's who we are. It's our nature. If you look up the definition of nature, nature means who you are, what happens naturally, your essence. Nature is like dharma. So you could say our dharma now is material consciousness. And naturally material consciousness means everything centers around me and I look at everything in relation to what will give me pleasure or what will cause me pain. And therefore I avoid painful things and I gravitate towards pleasurable things. If I look at something and it doesn't give me pleasure, what do I say? It's ugly. I don't like it. I don't want to look at it. If I look at something and it gives me pleasure, oh, that's beautiful. I want more of that. If something smells good, I want to taste it. We're wired this way. We're naturally conditioned. So much of what we're dealing with in becoming Krishna consciousness, and becoming Krishna conscious, so much of it is biological instincts. Eating instincts, sleeping instincts, anger instincts, sexual instincts that are well rehearsed for many, many lifetimes and well geared and wired into our very nature. So when we see them coming, we shouldn't be surprised. And it's just how we're wired. It's how the program is running. That's how, and the thing to understand is we are the software designers. We created that program. So now we become Krishna conscious and we have to start dealing with the program that we created. So that's the that's the paradox. So we don't like it, but we were the creators of that program that we don't like anymore. And we created the program. Why? So we could be happy. But now we realize that the program doesn't work. But the problem is that the program's still running. So we decide to become Krishna conscious, but that other program continues to run underneath our efforts to be Krishna conscious. Everyone experiences this. From the top down to the bottom, we all experience this. And this is what we're dealing with daily, on an hourly basis, on a minute-to-minute basis, on a second-to-second basis. It's this conditioning that we have to overcome. And until we reach a higher level of Krishna consciousness, like the level of ruchi or taste, or beyond that, we will not be naturally attracted to Krishna. And as long as we're not naturally attracted to Krishna, these other things are going to pull us. That's just the way it is. It's the reality of it. They're going to say, I'm over here, come on, let's go, this is what you want. And you're saying, no, I don't want that. And you're thinking, why is my mind, why is my heart pulling me over to these things? Because we're so well conditioned to think that way. It's just like, I don't know if you're this kind of person or you've been around a person like this, but people who are good in business, wherever they go, they'll tend to see money-making opportunities. It's just how they're wired. Or artists, they're visual people, so or photographers, they'll just be walking somewhere or driving somewhere and they'll see things that we don't see because that's how they're wired. Or musicians will hear things and hear horns honking, and from horns honking create rhythms in their mind. And so we're all wired differently, but one way we're all wired is we're wired to think about how we can enjoy. So that's what we're dealing with. And it happens naturally and spontaneously, even against our will. Even we realize we don't want that. So sometimes our mind will dictate, go look at this. And you'll be thinking, why should I look at that? I don't even want it. And the mind will be saying, no, you should look at it. There might be something there for you. Just go ahead, just check it out. It might make you happy. And we're looking at our minds doing these things and we're wondering, why is it that I've become Krishna conscious, that I'm doing these practices and my mind is still doing this? So the way we understand it and the way we deal with it is we see it as what it is. It's conditioning. It's programming that gradually, slowly will be deprogrammed through not fighting it, but through advancing in Krishna consciousness and sound is coming perfectly. I think it might be your computer. Is no sound coming, or is it just my PC? Yeah, refresh. So this is it's natural what's going on, because we're beginning a process, a way of thinking. We're beginning a process and a way of thinking that is so much different than how we've conditioned ourselves to think for millions of lifetimes. And we all experience this. We are naturally and spontaneously attracted to thinking about how we can enjoy. And we're so spontaneously attracted, we're like automatically programmed to think about enjoying even when we don't want to, even when the thing is not enjoyable. Like the businessman, there's an opportunity to make money and he doesn't even need it. But it's very difficult for him not to take advantage of it, because that's his nature. So our nature is to always take advantage of how we can enjoy and be happy. So we made the point that we need to be enthusiastic. We've made the point now that this is our conditioning, this is what we're dealing with, and that we can only overcome this conditioning not by fighting it head on, but only by becoming attracted to Krishna. Because Krishna is more attractive than Maya. And by becoming attracted to Krishna, then it becomes the impetus or the force behind our bhakti, and then it becomes exactly like now we're attracted to material things, we'll be attracted to Krishna, and it'll be natural and spontaneous, and then finally we can say, we've overcome the mind. But of course, then now I'm saying don't fight the mind, but then you might say, but Krishna is saying in the Gita, fight it. You have to control it. It can be an enemy. So, all right, that's true. So now we're going to backtrack a little bit, because what I said, I have to qualify that. The solution, the answer is to gain an attraction. But it is true that sometimes we do have to fight the mind in order that we can advance to the point of gaining that attraction. But just fighting the mind ultimately is not the solution. But let's talk a little bit about fighting the mind. And after we talk about the fighting of the mind, I'm going to read an amazing purport written by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur on the 9th chapter, verse 30, Bhagavad Gita, Apichet Sudarachara, which talks about a devotee who is trying to be Krishna conscious and failing, and how we understand that, and how Krishna sees that. So let's first look at it from a practical point of view in our own lives. Okay, we've decided to be Krishna conscious at some point. Actually, we're really deciding at every moment, at least we should be. It's not, decisions are not made once, they're made constantly. And that's why sometimes we feel, we may have felt that years ago we were stronger or more inspired than we are now. Because you may have decided not to be so Krishna conscious. So we're always making decisions to be Krishna conscious, and that's what we're meant to do. Now, at the same time, the mind, the heart is making decisions based on its past programming. So one of the things that I do, and I've told many devotees this, and I think I even told Palak Paneer, who's now with us, who it's even later for him. It's like 2 a.m. for him, or 6 hours later, 6:30. I think I told you this, Palak Paneer. His name is Pelag, but I renamed him. So, when the mind begins dictating something to us which is totally out of sync, out of alignment with what our lives are all about, and we wonder why our mind is speaking in a way, thinking in a way that is not Krishna conscious, that has nothing to do with Krishna conscious, we realize this is like the ghost of the past. This is the past conditioning. This is actually not who I am, but it's my former self. It's almost like if you took your former self before you began Krishna consciousness you could imagine what your former self would be doing now. And sometimes you see that your former self is acting up in ways that you consciously really wouldn't choose. At least if you had total control of yourself, you wouldn't choose to do that. And so when you see this other self, or this conditioned self, acting up, you think, okay, that's my former self trying to come into the present. It's acting up. But we always want to keep that former self in the past, not in the present, because that's where he belongs, or that's where she belongs. And we want to keep our Krishna conscious self in the present. So you kind of see, here's yourself, we're going forward, you're moving forward, and here's your past self. And as you're walking, you're going forward, your past self sometimes to catch up, and you just say, no, get back. That self doesn't belong here, and it will try to catch up, and you keep knocking it back. You have to just, instead of becoming discouraged, you just have to realize that's a reality. It's going to be that way. That's just how it is. So that's one way of dealing with it. Looking at it, how are you looking at it? You're looking at it in a detached way. Rukmini, if the sound is broken, it's got to be, and no one else, it's not broken for anyone else, maybe turn your computer off and reboot, and there may be some internal problem, perhaps. So that's kind of an objective stance. In other words, it's almost like you're looking at your mind and you're amazed by it, and you're thinking, this is really amazing that I become a devotee and I'm doing so much service and getting so much pleasure from serving Krishna, so much pleasure from hearing about Krishna, so much pleasure from associating with devotees. And still, today, or a minute ago, or an hour ago, my mind was thinking about something sinful that would only make me miserable. And I stand back and I look at it and I think, this is amazing. What is this? It's the past self. It's the conditioned self trying to come into the present to play havoc with my life by bringing in thoughts and desires that I have no desire to fulfill. At least my intelligence is aware that I have no desire to fulfill them. So this is a detached way of looking at the mind, where you get perspective. You're just looking at it for what it is. It's a conditioned entity responding to stimuli and circumstances in the way it was trained by who? By you. It was trained by you. It was trained by me. We trained ourselves. So it's doing its job. It's sorting out what it thinks you want and what it thinks you don't want. So gradually it takes some time to recondition that mind. But until the time comes that we recondition it, then we stand back from it and we just look at it and say, oh my, oh my Govinda. Look at this crazy mind. Look what it's thinking. And you detach and you realize that's not you. It is not what I want. It is not what I am desiring. It's just the mind. You kind of pull back. And as you do this, what you're doing is you're pulling the sails out of the wind of the mind. Because you're detaching and it can't really clobber you. It can't really pull you because you detach yourself a little bit from it. And more importantly, if you do this, then it won't be so discouraging because you realize this is not what you want. It's really not what you want. It's just there. It's there. Okay, so now I get so many letters where devotees are saying, I'm this, I'm that, and this happens and that happens, and I don't want it, and I'm sure you don't get, if you don't get letters like that, you experience that. We all experience that. The kind of discouragement of our own problems that we have to live with, and we know them well because we live with them. And I get many letters of discouragement. And so how we process this and how we deal with this is very nicely explained by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And I'm going to read his commentary on the 9th verse. Excuse me, the 9th chapter, 30th verse. So, first I would like to read the verse. For those of you who don't know this, this is quite a well-known verse. And the Sanskrit is apichet sudarachara, which means, even though somebody does something very bad, bachite mam ananyamak, but if his life is dedicated to serving me, sador eva samantavya, you should consider him a sadhu. He said, I consider him a sadhu, mantavya, that's my opinion. Samyak vivastito isa, because he's situated. He's situated in his service. And Vishwanath Chakravarti further elaborates on this. If you're making any questions or comments, I'm not going to see them now because I'm off the chat. And so let's go through this. Well, let's read the translation, because I was just giving you the word by word. So let's read the translation to give you a better feel for the verse. Even if one commits the most abominable action, if he is engaged in devotional service, he is to be considered saintly, because he is properly situated in his determination. Let me read that again. Even if one commits the most abominable action, if he is engaged in devotional service, he is to be considered saintly because he is properly situated in his determination. The key there is determination. Let's see what Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says. One might ask, but if someone is corrupted by such bad behavior, how can he be a sadhu? Natural question. Did you ask that? Krishna says he's a sadhu even though he does something abominable. Doesn't make sense. Okay, he's trying to do devotional service, but he does something abominable. This is answered. Quote, this is Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. He should be considered as such. In other words, as such means sadhu, and thought of as a sadhu. He should be considered, quote unquote, he should be considered, that's from the verse, is an injunctive statement. If this injunction is disobeyed, there will be unfavorable consequences. In other words, the evidence for the truth of this is that it is simply my command. So in other words, he's saying that Krishna is ordering that we see a devotee who has committed something abominable. If that devotee's heart and soul and determination are there to serve Krishna, we should consider him a sadhu. For the sake of this discussion, I wanted to focus on ourselves rather than someone else. So when we're talking about consider him, I would like you to consider yourself. Put yourself in that place. That you are going to consider yourself a sadhu. Sounds maybe not so Krishna conscious, but you'll understand by the end of this that it has a Krishna conscious happy ending. So Krishna is saying here, not only should you consider him a sadhu, it's my order. That you must. It's an injunction. It's an injunction, you must do this. Otherwise, there'll be unfavorable consequences. So you must even consider yourself a sadhu if your heart and soul is engaged in Krishna consciousness. Interesting. Well, someone might say, one may be considered a sadhu partially to the extent that he is worshipping you, but to the extent he is usurping other men's wives and property, he is not to be considered a sadhu. To the extent that he's usurping other men's wives and property, now he's saying, well, maybe this devotee is going around with other men's wives and stealing. How can you say he's a sadhu? Good point, right? This is answered by the word eva, only. he should only be considered a sadhu in all ways, completely. It's getting more confusing? We'll get to the end of this. Very important. We should never view him not as a sadhu. Here is the point. It's really nice. Everyone listen, pay attention, don't do anything else. This was really important. His determination is completely fixed. This is how he thinks. Quote, I may go to hell or obtain an animal birth because of my unavoidable sinful reactions. But I will never give up my exclusive worship of Sri Krishna. Such determination is praiseworthy. Let me read that again, because this is really what I wanted to get at. I think this is really the essence here. We should never view him as not a sadhu. His determination is completely fixed. Quote, he thinks, I may go to hell or obtain an animal birth because of my unavoidable sinful reactions. But I will never give up my exclusive worship of Sri Krishna. Unquote. Such determination is praiseworthy. So, the point that Krishna is making, he's saying, Sador eva samantavyag samyo vivastito hisat. He's situated in this position that internally he's made his full commitment and his determination that come hell or high water, I won't give up the service of Krishna. Therefore he's a sadhu. So that's how Krishna is defining sadhu. Now, Krishna knows, and this is described in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, and Krishna says, sometimes my devotee, they want me, but they're weak, and they go after something material. He acknowledges that even though their heart is in the right place, due to conditioning, due to habit, he may fall down. So the same thing is being described here. So what is Krishna saying? What Krishna is saying here is he's looking at the intention, he's looking at the heart. He's looking at the dedication. And the fall down or the maya in the person's life is, from Krishna's point of view, just peripheral and not important. What is important is the heart. Turn that around and let's say he didn't have such great determination, but somehow he managed externally to keep his act together, to keep himself steady. It's not as important. So Krishna is showing here what's really important. Now, how do we relate this to ourselves? You remember I began by saying we have to remain enthusiastic despite causes for being unenthusiastic. So here is a way to turn this around. Krishna is saying, if within your heart you're sincere, that's your fundamental qualification. And despite the craziness of the mind and heart, and even sometimes how we slip and become bewildered and attracted, and even may do something sinful, if deep in our heart all we want is to serve Krishna, that's really our desire. And even though the mind is dictating so many things, that's really not what we want. Deep down in our heart of hearts we want Krishna. Then we should be happy and satisfied within ourselves. And we should be encouraged. We should encourage ourselves. Yes, pat yourself on the back. Yes, Mahatma. Yes. You want Krishna. You're doing good. That's what's important. You can all pat yourself on the back if that's how you feel. Otherwise, you'll look at the other things and you'll just become discouraged and say, well, what's the use? I'm so fallen. I'm so this or that. And you'll like talk yourself out of your enthusiasm. Not a good idea. Don't talk yourself out of enthusiasm. So, you want to serve Krishna. Connect with that desire. Hold on to that. Hold on to your sincerity. Hold on to those prayers. Hold on to that intention to be Krishna conscious. That's what's important. That's what Krishna sees. And Krishna says it's so important, and he sees it as so important, that he would go so far as to say, even if you commit something sinful, as bad as going off with another man's wife, still, because all at heart you really want to do is serve me, you're a sadhu. Amazing, huh? So this is the secret for us, how we can remain enthusiastic. When we see, oh, I'm so envious, or I'm so attached to this or that, or I'm so attracted to this or that. What's wrong with me? Or I'm so lazy, or I'm so this, whatever it is. That's okay. It's just a program playing out. That's all it is. What's important is to focus on your intention, your desire to be Krishna conscious. Don't ever let that go away. That's our life, that's our umbilical cord to Krishna consciousness. That's so important. But the purport continues, so let's read on. Well, let me go. I will go to the chat and see if anyone has a question or made a comment. That was a heavy thought. I don't know what the thought was, but maybe you could tell us. Ganapati Das says it was a heavy thought. Okay, so we'll continue reading. But one might ask, why do you accept the worship of such an irreligious person? Why do you consume the food and drink offered by one whose heart is contaminated by lust, anger, and other faults? He's talking to Krishna. Why do you, capital Y, Krishna? Okay, but why do you accept the worship of such an irreligious person? In response, the Lord says, quote, this is the next verse in the Bhagavad Gita, he quickly becomes religious. This is not expressed as he is going to quickly become or he will soon achieve peace. Rather, the present tense is used. He becomes and he attains. The Lord continues. This means that immediately, okay, this is the part, wonderful part. Pay attention, focus, listen. This is powerful. The Lord continues, this means that immediately after he commits impiety, he remembers me and he feels remorse. He thus quickly becomes religious. He thinks, alas, alas, there is no person more fallen than me. I defile the reputation of the community of devotees. Damn me. Again and again, feeling remorse like this, he achieves complete peace and detachment. In other words, sometimes we do something wrong. Okay, we're conditioned. We go back to this idea. We're conditioned. Don't pound yourself against a wall, beat yourself up till you're red in the face. But you should feel remorse. I should feel remorse. We should feel remorse. Look how fallen I am. Look how sinful I am. Look how bad I am. Because this kind of remorse is what turns us around. If it's understood and experienced in the right way, it becomes a source of enthusiasm, of energy, not a depression, not a discouragement. So when you're looking at your mind doing something, or you've actually done it, your mind's thinking of doing it, or you've done it. And so when you're looking at that, you detach yourself and you look and you say, just see, what a wretch I am for thinking like this. Just see how lowly and degraded I am. And in this way, you feel remorseful. You say, oh, Krishna, I don't deserve to be your devotee. You're so kind. You're allowing me to be your devotee. But the point is, the devotee, in his heart, he's feeling, he said, even though I'm such a wretch, I can't stop. I can't stop my service. I can't give it up. No matter how fallen I am, I can't give it up. I can't stop it. You're too attracted. There's just something in me that wants to serve you. And so naturally, if we have that mentality, then the feeling of remorse will come. I just want you, but I'm not serving you properly, or I've failed you. So I feel remorseful. Fie on me, damn on me. What does he say? Damn me. Alas, alas, there is no person more fallen than me. I defile the reputation of the community of devotees. Look at me. I'm so unqualified to even be called a devotee. I defile the reputation of the other devotees if you call me a devotee. So, this is how he makes advancement, or this is how we make advancement, or this is how we use the anarthas to become causes of our advancement. A lot of times, what may happen, or often what may happen, is that in confronting these anarthas again and again, day after day, year after year, at some point, we become so disgusted, we just want nothing to do with them. We're finished with it. So I want nothing to do with this. That's it. It's over. I don't want it. I don't need it. I'm fed up. I want to be Krishna conscious. So sometimes that material attachment has this nature to it that after a while it starts to become painful. And so painful, at some point we become detached. And Krishna gradually becomes sweeter and sweeter. So by executing bhakti, devotional service, over time, Krishna gradually becomes sweeter, and the pain caused by material attachment becomes more bitter, more painful. And so the process of detachment naturally happens. The point is, or one point is, that we shouldn't give up when we see these things. Rather, as described here, we should feel bad. And that feeling bad becomes the source of rectification. That's the meaning of remorse. When we feel remorseful, we rectify because of how bad we feel. He goes on, well, one may say, if he actually becomes religious, there can be no argument about such a person. But what about a devotee whose behavior is wicked and who fails to give up his bad behavior throughout his whole life? What can be said about him? Good question. Always affectionate to his devotees, the Lord responds to this doubt with complete confidence, and with some anger in the words beginning Konteya. Krishna says, my devotee never perishes. Even when he dies, he never falls down. So this is really a glimpse, you could say, into the mind of Krishna, which also gives us a glimpse into the heart of bhakti, because here Krishna is saying the external is not how he judges, but it's the internal that he judges. I saw this with Prabhupada. People did many suduracharo, many abominable things. And as long as they wanted to do service, he accepted them. As long as they were willing to fan their own spark of bhakti, as long as he saw that desire within, then he didn't judge them by their external failures. He accepted their heart that they want to serve Krishna. Now, in some cases, obviously, Prabhupada asked us to do things to produce results externally. But in most cases, it was not that we could please Prabhupada with external results. It was that he wanted us to bring bhakti, not money. I mean, we needed money, yes. We needed money to build temples and print books. But the real thing is, he wanted us to bring bhakti. That's what really pleased him. So that's what Krishna sees, and that's what pleases him. Just like parents love their children so much. Even their children fail, even their children may break the law, even their children may do this or that, they still love them. So Krishna loves us if he sees that we want to love him. So that's what's important. And so no matter what's going on externally, if you find within your heart that, yes, Krishna consciousness is what I want, then don't become discouraged because Krishna is pleased with you. Don't become unhappy about it. Krishna is pleased with you. Know that all this conditioning, it's just part of becoming Krishna conscious. We all have to go through it. Nobody is spared. And so, in going through it, what do? We just tolerate it. There it is again, sneaking up around me. I thought he left. He came back. The envy, it's piercing my heart. What do? I tolerate it. I go on. I do not allow it to divert me. That's the whole key. Because these anarthas can easily divert us from Krishna consciousness if we take them too seriously. If they depress us, then we look at them and say, what's the use? Become discouraged. But if we are fixed in our determination, Krishna is what I want, then we can tolerate them. And then we just realize I just have to do that. Just part of being Krishna conscious is that I'm going to have to tolerate these things. It's just the way it is. And we don't have to get so up in arms about them. We just have to look at it and say, yuck. It's the new mantra. Yuck. Maybe we should call this class yuck. When I look at my conditioned side, that's the mantra I chant. I chant yuck. This is horrible. I hate it. Krishna, I'm trying to love you. And all these other things are coming up. Yuck. Yuck. But yuck is good because I look at it as something yucky. I don't know. Roma, you know what yucky means? Is yucky an American word or does it transcend? Does it go to India? Sneha, you know what yucky means? I guess you can tell what it means just by the way the word sounds. It's yucky. Yuck. I think it must be a universal word, right? So we have to see that, okay, there's a lot of yucky things going on. And if we actually see them as yucky, it's easier to tolerate. It's just yuck. It's there. It's like you're walking in the park, right? And there's some dog poop, and you walk by and it smells. And then you walk by it, you say to yourself, yuck. But what do? You don't kill yourself. You just tolerate it. So, now, it is 8:46. I would like to stop here and see if you have any comments or questions. Because we've come to the end of his purport, and I have made all the points that I would like to make. I have to get back in here. Oh my God. I don't know if they're going to let me in. I've been knocked out. Now, how can I read your questions if I'm knocked out? Let's see. Please try again later or immediately access by signing up with chat. There are 10 spots. Okay, somebody's got to get off so I can see, because I can't hear you. Someone has to get off so I can see. Say, if you don't have a question, get off the chat, because I need to get on and I'll read all the questions. Or if you don't have a question or comment, get off so I can enter. Otherwise, okay, good. Okay, let's go back here. Rama says, so how do I explain when Prabhupada says that even if you may have a pinch of material desire, you'll have to take birth again? Because the goal of Krishna consciousness, or when we're Krishna conscious, is to be attracted to Krishna. Goal is prema. So you can't get prema with a pinch of material desire. But in the Gita, what does Krishna say? One who can tolerate. Right? And what does Prabhupada say in the purport? He says, as long as you have a body, you'll have certain desires. So some desires are simply physical, and other desires are deeply situated in the heart. So these things will, eating, sleeping, mating, defending, anger. A lot of this is wired physically. So we have to tolerate those things. They're going to be there because we have the body. So these things, they'll always be there. Inconveniences, sometimes they upset us. We have to tolerate those. So material desire, those are not big desires. Big desires, we want to be Krishna. Those are the things that we cannot have that. The big false ego desires, we cannot have that and be Krishna conscious. And the other things we tolerate because we have a body. That's what Krishna says in the Gita. And then Rukmini says he quickly becomes righteous. I think that's what this whole purport of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is saying. But you could also say he's saying he always was righteous. He quickly becomes. Yes, both things are there. He is righteous because his heart's in the right place. And because his heart's in the right place, he'll become righteous. But if your heart's not in the right place and you just tolerate, then what's going to happen? At some point you will fall down. Because unless we become attracted to Krishna, we can't just fight it indefinitely. We'll fall. So that's the whole point. By this determined devotional service, gradually we'll advance and then we'll become attracted to Krishna. And then there'll be no battle anymore because Maya won't be attractive. Prabhupada once said, Maya means, how do we know we're in Maya? I mean that material things become more attractive than Krishna. So Krishna consciousness means Krishna becomes more attractive than anything else. Simple definition. Palik Panir says, what forms does remorse take? What about self-acceptance to our wrongness, sinfulness, choices for good and bad? Very good question. So, remorse is remorse is actually positive. And let's say what you're saying here, did I lose you? No. You're saying self-acceptance to our wrongness. No. You see, if remorse is the foundation, then you can accept your wrongness because you'll purify it and you'll upgrade it. But continually acting on your wrongness and not feeling remorse, and as the devotee, as Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur said, say, I'm so bad, I'm so rotten. That kind of thing. Not that I'm so bad, I'm so rotten, and we continue doing it. But I'm so bad and I'm so rotten, and I feel remorse and humility, and thus become empowered to gradually, maybe not overnight, but gradually overcome these. I think that's the key here. That something's being done because of the intention, because of the desire that I just want Krishna. Something's being done internally to become purified. And here he's saying it's coming in the form of remorse. If there's no remorse, then I would say, are you really trying to purify yourself? Do you really care that you did something bad? Or do you not care? Because sometimes we don't care. Sometimes we get lazy, and sometimes we feel helpless and say, what can I do? We're never helpless, but sometimes we feel that way, which means we don't care. We're not willing to try. But because we want Krishna, we feel bad. And gradually that feeling of bad will become the impetus, the source, which will energize us, elevating ourselves. So that's how we evaluate things. Okay, be honest. And if you don't want Krishna and you only commit sin, then at least be honest that there'll be a reaction. And don't complain about it. And another thing that's really important that I didn't mention, but now with this question, it's coming up, that Shastra says that every time we commit a sinful action, a seed of sin is dropped, and that seed sprouts into a desire to continue that same sinful activity. Or even if it's not sinful, it's just an activity that isn't Krishna conscious. Every time we do it, a seed is dropped. We want to do it more and more. So now we're in this conditioned state, we're trying to become Krishna conscious, and we see all these things that are getting in the way. But if we give in to them, what is it doing? It's dropping more seeds, and therefore it becomes more difficult to give up. So if we want to become Krishna conscious, then I would think within that remorse would be the realization, I need to stop doing this, because the more I do it, the more I become conditioned to do it again. And it can become an addiction. Right? And so I have to alter that course. I have to change the patterns in my consciousness, in my life, and stop doing those things. So it's really a good meditation. It's really powerful meditation, because if we are facing something that's troublesome and tends to be continually troublesome, every time we give into it, we're giving it more energy, and it's going to come back, and sometimes it's going to come back stronger. So really what we're doing by tolerating and not giving into it is we're reducing the frequency, the energy, the power behind it, and gradually it's going to become easier to deal with, and it's going to fade more. But if we give it energy, then we're reinforcing it, and that's stupid, and that becomes a problem for us. So yes, accept your wrongness by accepting that it's wrong. Accept your sinfulness by accepting that it's wrong. Accept your bad choices, that you made them wrong. And feel regretful, remorseful, and humbled by it in a way that you want to improve. And if you don't want, if you accept it in a way in which it doesn't empower you to improve, then you're stuck. You're not going anywhere. So your very sinfulness can actually help you, or it can harm you, depending on how you deal with it. So Ganapati Das says, the heavy thought I referred to was by keeping Krishna in your heart, even though the world around you is pulling your mind this way, and that it allows you to be worthy of a pat on the back. Yeah. I mean, a lot of times, my mind is racing towards something, and I just don't do it. Because I know it's not what Prabhupada wants me to do. Even though I maybe like to do it. It's not the right thing. Or it's not the right time to do it. And I say, way to go, Mahatma. You're good. Sometimes we need to do that. We need to acknowledge. Otherwise, you're acknowledging how bad you are. Oh, look at me. Look at these thoughts in my heart. As opposed to acknowledging, hey, look at these thoughts. Even though they're there, I didn't do anything about it. Even though I felt like doing this, I didn't. Or even though I didn't feel like doing my japa this morning when I woke up, I did it. Because that's sadhana. I don't always feel like doing it. I'm not on the platform of Raganuga. But I did it. And a lot of times we'll wake up and we won't want to chant, and we'll think, I'm so bad, I don't want to chant. I have no taste. And I chant, and I just become depressed that I have no taste. But why not sometimes pat yourself on the back and say, even though I have no taste, I chanted. And even though there was no taste for 16 rounds, I did it with determination, and I did my best. I made my best efforts. Why not pat yourself on the back like that? Why not see that side of it? Because that's what Krishna is seeing. That's what he's attracted to. A lot of times we cannot produce results. We can only do the process. So if that's what is attracting Krishna, then let's acknowledge it. Let's be aware of it. It was simply a thought captured at the moment. I've lost it now by explaining it. I think we've got the thought. In other words, we keep Krishna in focus despite all the things the mind is pulling us towards. And we say, okay, that's just the mind, that's my past self, that's my former self. You know, once you get initiated, then when that mind comes up, you can give it your old name. Well, that's just Greg revisiting me. But now I'm Ganapati Das. I've got nothing to do with Greg. Greg is a jerk. He's always bothering me with all kinds of ridiculous ideas and all kinds of schemes and plans that will cause me all kinds of trouble and misery. That's my former self. Let's put him in the garage where he belongs, or dump him down the toilet, or bury him 10 feet down in the ground. We can look at it that way. Have fun. Don't become discouraged by it. Just observe it. That's all you can do. Observe it. And when you observe it, observe that you want Krishna also. Those are the two things to observe. That this is going on and I don't want it. And my mind's saying you want it, and I'm saying, no thank you. I've given that up. You can go back home now. You can go to sleep now. I don't need you. I think that's what I was saying, and that must have been what you got from it. Unless you got something else that's even better. Okay. Roma says, it's funny how we have a tendency to look at Maya in a negative way, seeing her as the enemy. But actually, this external form of Krishna's energy is so good in helping us, make us better devotees. You know, when we're struggling, and it's difficult, we should realize that we need that. We need that difficulty because it makes us struggle. So, yes. The opposition is necessary. Competition. Maya is creating more Krishna consciousness in us if we accept it. So it's a very good point. Although Maya is meant to keep us in the material world, she helps devotees. She doesn't want devotees. Those who are determined, she'll help. She'll get behind you. But if you're going to give her the time of day, she's not going to get behind you. But if you show her you want Krishna consciousness, I think it's Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur said, she'll actually help you. Nice, huh? So, Roma confirms and Sneha confirms Yak is a global expression, which means what it sounds like. Yak. Okay. Abhikam says he has a question, but before he asks this question, quickly becomes religious. Let me go back. Before Abhikam, we get to your question. Rukmini Didi is saying he quickly becomes religious. So we're going to go back to that document and see if I read it wrong, or because in Prabhupada's Gita it says righteous. Quickly becomes religious. That's the translation. Yes. If you're righteous, you're religious. If you're religious, you're righteous, I would say. So Bhaktin Carol says, I read this recently. The senses of the individual being are not his own. The devotee knows that such senses belong to the Supreme Lord, and that they can be properly used when they are employed for the service of the Lord. The senses are instruments, and elements are ingredients, all endowed by the Lord. Therefore, whatever an individual can do, speak, see, etc., is under the direction of the Lord only. Yeah, this is the consciousness that, okay, I have this body, I have these senses. Do I have a right to use them for my personal gratification? Well, we have the independence to do, but do we really have a right? In the sense we could say, no, we don't, because they belong to Krishna and they're meant to be used for Him. So if you're in that consciousness, that's a very high consciousness. Because it's hard enough to use everything in this world for Krishna, everything we see, and get rid of everything we don't need. Just like I'm cleaning my house and cleaning my studio. And there's so many things that I used to need or I thought I needed that I don't need, so I'm throwing away. And some things I look at and I say, I don't need this, but I don't want to throw it away. And I throw it away anyway. Because if I don't need it, I can't use it for Krishna, then what am I going to use it for? For my material enjoyment. Throw it away. You don't need it. Whatever it is. So that's the idea. So it's kind of like we're throwing our senses away. We don't need them for material enjoyment, so we don't use them for that. That's an advanced stage of devotional service, and that's how an advanced devotee sees things. But we have enough trouble just not using material things. What to speak of not using our own senses? That's a very elevated stage. But it's a natural stage when you advance. You naturally see that way. An advanced devotee, he can't see it any other way. He can't think any other way. He can't act any other way. He has no desire to use his senses for anything other than Krishna service. And on an advanced level of bhakti, he cannot experience any pleasure from those senses if they're not used in Krishna service. That's the point. Why would he use them? Why would he use them in his sense gratification when he's not even looking at that as pleasure anymore. It's actually seeing it as pain. So, Avikam, we didn't get your question. But Bhaktin Carol says, continues, quote, "No one is free to act freely and independently, and as such, one should always seek the permission of the Lord to act or eat or speak, and by the blessing of the Lord, everything done by a devotee is beyond the principles of the 4 defects typical of the conditioned soul." That's from the Srimad Bhagavatam 2.4.11. By the blessing of the Lord, yes. This is interesting. One should always seek the permission of the Lord to act or eat or speak. So in a sense, we're doing that because we should only eat prasadam. So we only have permission to eat prasadam. I mean, technically speaking, absolutely speaking, we only have permission to eat prasadam. We only have permission to associate with devotees. We only have permission to hear Krishna Katha. Of course, for practical affairs in this world, we have to do things which means associating or in some way being with non-devotees, hearing things that are not Krishna conscious and so forth. So that wouldn't come under that restriction. It's voluntarily. If we voluntarily want to hear things that are not Krishna conscious, speak things that are not Krishna conscious, eat food which is not offered, be with people who are not Krishna conscious, then that would be a violation of this principle. What is the principle? No one is free to act freely and independently. One should always seek the permission of the Lord to act or speak. We don't have it's like, do we have permission to sing anything we want to sing, or speak anything we want to speak, or read anything we want to read? Technically, we don't. I mean, no one's got a gun to our head, but technically, if we want to be fully Krishna conscious, we want to fully serve Krishna and our Guru, then technically there are a lot of rights that have been taken away from us. Of course we can do it. We can go sit down and watch the Olympics, waste some time. We can do that. But technically those eyes are meant for seeing the deity, not watching the Olympics. So technically speaking, we don't have the right to watch the Olympics. Actually, if Prabhupada came back tomorrow and he asked you what you were doing today, what would you like to tell him you were doing? Would you like to tell him you were serving Krishna, talking about Krishna, seeing Krishna, tasting Krishna? You wouldn't want to tell him you were absorbed in watching mundane movies, mundane sports, eating at restaurants and so forth. You wouldn't want to tell him that. You know that. You'd be embarrassed to tell him that, wouldn't you? You'd want to tell him that you're using your senses totally for Krishna. So Krishnadas says, sometimes there are sincere devotees, but due to weakness, they violate the regulative principles. And sometimes the temple management and the devotees around may develop a need to correct them, and the devotee may feel discouraged by the attitude of the devotees around them. What is the best way to deal with such management issues? Because such devotees who are deviating may become bad association for others. Well, if they're living in the temple, then you have to take a stricter position. If they're not living in the temple, then you have to look at it in a couple of ways. How can you help them, number one? And can they actually be helped in their current position? Some people may not be capable at the present time of fully following all the principles. Or maybe they took initiation too soon. Maybe they're not ready. And you may have to recognize that and say, okay, you're not ready, but do what you can and gradually improve. The main thing is to know what the goal is. So we don't want to beat around the bush about the goal. Say, this is the goal. 16 rounds, 4 regular principles, and clearly define what that means. And if you can't do it now, that's the goal. So let's see how close you can get to doing it. If you can't do it now, unfortunately, you can't live in a temple. You can live outside the temple and do your best. Now, can you do that if you're not initiated? If you're initiated, Of course you can do it, you're not supposed to, but still the goal is to come to that position where you'll be able to do it at some point. But one of the things that's very important is not to give in to our weakness and not to rationalize it and make excuses. And one time a devotee had difficulty and Prabhupada said, that's because you're chanting offensively. So we have to look back to our basics. And we always want to encourage devotees. We don't want, if you try to help somebody and they end up being discouraged, then what's the point? But if the devotees are happy, if devotees are inspired, that's how they'll follow the principles. And that's how Prabhupada trained us to get devotees to follow the principles. Inspire them. Engage them in a way that they'll be inspired. And then they'll naturally follow the principles. So inspiration is always the key. Always, always, always. And sometimes you can be heavy if you have a relationship with that person. And he'll accept that. If you don't have such a relationship, it will backfire. The situations you present will be different everywhere. So that's a general idea. Always look for the best way to encourage somebody. And always try to understand what are the parameters, how much you can encourage them to do. Maybe they're not capable of following all the principles. So there'll have to be some restrictions or concessions. Okay, it's 9:10. Can we end class now and get ready to get up early tomorrow for Balaram's appearance day? I think it's Balaram's appearance day in India as well. Thank you, everyone. Next Tuesday, I will be somewhere in California, and we should not have a problem. Hopefully we won't. We should not have a problem doing this. If we're unable to do it, I will let you know, one way or the other, okay? Thank you all. I hope this helped you. I hope this will help you in remaining enthusiastic despite all the reasons, quote unquote, not to be enthusiastic, when really we know there is no reason not to be enthusiastic if we understand this conditioning is natural, it's normal, we all deal with it, we all have to go through it, we have to learn to tolerate it, we have to learn to detach ourselves. When we see it, we can say, yuck, that's not me, that's my old self, and keep moving forward based on your desire. Krishna, I want you. And pat yourself on the back. All right, maybe we should call this class Pat Yourself on the Back. Thank you very much, everyone. Give yourself a good pat on the back. Hare Krishna.